Welcome to the podcast, where street smart, business smart, all kinds of smart people share their insights into the world of marketing, career journeys, and personal growth. So sit back and prepare to get enlightened with your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast where I bring you the best and brightest from the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today, James Hornick, is a seasoned talent acquisition pro and partner at Hirewell, where he has specialized in the recruitment of marketing and tech pros since 2005. So he's been through the ups and downs of the economy, and we'll certainly talk about that. And he created Hirewell's digital experience and marketing recruiting practice while also leading the firm's internal digital marketing initiatives and biz dev. And we're going to talk about all that and a whole lot more. Prior tenure, he worked at enterprise tech with sales at Alchemy and WorldCom, and he believes in building lasting relationships through honesty, transparency, as well as telling the jokes, which sometimes end up to be funny. And I think that's how we connected, right? Like, I believe, James, if I think my joke is funny, that's all that really matters. I'm kind of selfish with my jokes, and I'll definitely take your jokes on that. And in spare time, he trades financial derivatives, so he's a little bit of a nerd, lifts weights. I really can't tell from his button-down shirt, and struggles to learn Spanish. Muy difícil. James and I have been connected for a bit. I admire the success he has had in the recruitment industry and the solid advice he is always giving, and he continues to add value. And this should certainly be a lively chat. So let's dig in. James Hornick, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Paz.
We are here. We are all here. We are all here. We are in the age of coronavirus. We're doing everything we can on LinkedIn. So let's start here. I think I did a pretty thorough introduction, but I always love to ask folks, especially recruiters, like, tell us your career story real quick. Like, as you would kind of coach a candidate, like, give us that elevator pitch in 90 seconds, man.
Yeah. So dating myself. So, I graduated in the year 2000. So my career is, 20 years into this.
Damn.
And at that point in time, like I was, my first job was really getting into tech sales. Like I really enjoyed technology, wasn't a technologist by trade. The first job I got was with a company that actually brought me to Chicago, a company called UUNet, which was part of WorldCom, which, if it wasn't for Enron, WorldCom would probably be the most well-known blow-up of all time. They got overshadowed a bit, but that was an experience, like the stuff you see in movies, when you're in your early 20s, you think stuff like this doesn't happen. You find out right away it does, but it was still a good experience, kind of just understanding sales. And I work with Akamai Technologies, which was a great company. Still have nothing but great things to say about those guys. But how I got into recruiting. So 2 recessions ago, love saying that.
2 recessions ago, right?
Yeah,
not the third one coming up.
Yeah, the tech recession. Things got tough. It was and I guess my experience from tech sales also soured me a little bit because, like, I had there were a couple times where you would sell something, some widget, some piece of technology that just didn't work. And I really like the idea of kind of things. I like the idea of getting into recruiting and kind of making that shift because at least I knew the fulfillment that I do. Mm-hmm. And, I'm responsible for it if I do a good job, but also like there's an aspect where you're helping people and kind of what they're doing. So recruiting is a sales job, as you know. So it was very much just kind of making a small pivot kind of in a different, area. But I liked it better. I like the accountability. I like knowing that, the success or failure is more up to me versus me selling something that someone else created. So that was really what kind of got me into it originally. So
that's fantastic. So let's talk about Hirewell for a minute there. I'll give you your chance to plug it. We were talking about it offline, how are you guys different than all the other recruiting agencies out there?
So I've been with Hirewell since 2005. So it's been, 15 years. And I guess the things that we're very much, we like working with people and having very close relationships where we're very long-term focused. I'm very much against the short term. And I ran about this all the time on LinkedIn. I think that most of the problems in the recruiting industry are focused on short-term, immediate,
100%.
End of month kind of close metrics. And we're more focused on actually trying to solve hiring challenges for companies. And I could go in a lot of directions with this answer, but one thing we did that's different than a lot of other companies is we built out 5 separate recruiting teams. Actually got a 6th one now that I slipped my mind. But so when I started my career, I was very focused in tech recruiting. When we were 4 people in the early days, that's what we did. But we always wanted to be able to do more. So we can fulfill across an organization. We do HR recruiting, digital experience and marketing, sales, finance, and accounting.
Right, so pretty diversified as a solution provider for a company. You could come in and not just be your marketing, but you could come in and also pitch. We also handle HR, your back of house, all these other functionality.
Yeah, and it's also
some of them.
It's also making scalable solutions, and that's kind of the bigger piece. Is that we have we actually just launched a case study site which ties in actual client feedback, so you can hear their words and in their own words. But working with companies where if it's if they have a large hiring initiative, or they had someone go on maternity leave, or they got a round of funding or something where it's all of a sudden one day they had to hire X, now they need to hire 2 or 3X.
Scalability element.
We can have someone actually assist them, not just with the sourcing, but all the back end stuff. So in terms of like setting up interviews, ATS management, all the heavy lifting HR stuff, while still working with the rest of the organization. So there's a higher level of service, but we're also able to do it at a lower price than contingent services, which are pretty high. So especially if you're trying to hire a ton. So it's just a different business model that makes more sense for us and our clients. So you have to have a level of professionalism and trust, and not focused on, again, those crappy short-term metrics, which I think drives the quality down in recruiting. So
and that's fascinating too. I mean, that's my model, for NHP Talent Group. I mean, I moved away from strict contingency, and we'll talk about, how contingency is hopefully moving away, but it's about adding value, right? Like, what else could you do? Those days of the big fee, right? Like, what else could you provide me? If we're doling out 20% just to fill a warm body in the seat. No, it's got to be added value, and there's so many recruiters out there. And the first thing I want to talk about before we get into innovation is the barrier to entry. It's so easy for anybody to be a recruiter. There's no license, there's no test you need to take. You don't need to do anything. I personally think that there should, kind of like a Series 7, like for financial investments, there should be a test for recruiting. What are your thoughts on that?
Test for recruiting? What would you include in that
seriously.
test?
I'd fail that test right now. No, but like, think about it. Like, there's certain criteria you need to meet to really understand. I mean, if you want to get technical about it, right, there's certain laws in New York State. I can't ask, with the compensation, but certain things that say, like, I'm a certified recruiter, I've passed this test. There's a value to that as well. I'm just curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, who's going to administer it though? That's the thing. You know what I mean? Like, who's this central body for recruitment and authority?
Department of Recruitment Division of
Department
of Recruiting.
I like the idea of making sure there's a baseline competency. I just really question whether it can be pulled off, because really, who's the expert in this? And that would be my issue. So
just a little curveball there.
Yeah, I like it, but I don't think it's feasible.
Cool. So let's get back to innovation a little bit. And why do you think contingency is stupid?
I think if you go back 20, 30 years or so, right, it was a different marketplace than it is now. And skill sets, take any area, take technology, everything was very much more, I don't want to say, everything was a little bit more generic. So I'm trying to remember the early days when I got into recruiting. If you had, even before that, .NET and Java, right? Those were like the 2 main languages people kind of always hired for. But there wasn't a lot of differentiation past that. If you needed a front-end developer, you needed someone who HTML, CSS, JavaScript, those were like what you needed.
Like the core.
But now, but now it's like there's a countless, unlimited number of like JavaScript libraries that could be a hard requirement for something. Or in Microsoft or any other area, it's much more specific. It's gotten broader in terms of the types of things people could look for, and everything is much more fine-lined. Point being, we've gone from a marketplace where if you just had, a pool of candidates and you were able to supply them to somebody, they were probably going to hire one. Whereas now every single search you do is true headhunting. It's much more specific. It's much more time intensive. So the challenge is that companies sometimes, first off, there's no buy-in from the company side when you're doing contingent. So everything's become a purple squirrel hunt. So if you get a really, really hard rec, and you're just saying this to be kind of more self-serving, you're going to kind of tune out if you're getting, if the client's expectations are unrealistic and it's contingent, you're going to move on to something else that's a little more realistic.
Right. You're chasing the dollar and the opportunity.
Meanwhile, the client thinks that what they typically do is they're going to then, farm it out to more firms, and they're going to send the same requirements out. And pretty soon they've sent it out to 5 or 10 different places, and they're all having the same experience. And they also realize that all these other firms are working on it. So pretty much everyone throws their hands up, and then the client thinks, okay, everyone just sucks. No one can get it done. the real goal is to be able to work with companies and have a true partnership on a firm where you're able to articulate, okay, this is why this may not be realistic, or being able to kind of have a two-way feedback, but it's time intensive. You know what I mean? So it's the kind of thing where without having that type of buy-in, and not to mention it's expensive. So honestly, when we do retain stuff, like we're typically doing it, that's the other problem with like the traditional retained search is also a train wreck because the whole 33 and a third, it's like the classic modeling in terms of pricing.
Right. We're like a third up front, a third before.
It's insane because that made sense back in the days when before LinkedIn, right? When there were actually proprietary databases.
Right. There were Rolodexes, right? Like your network was proprietary, right? It was your network.
Yeah. Now none of that's
physical, right? Now it's shared everywhere.
When we do retained work, we're doing it for less than contingent, not more than contingent typically.
Exactly.
So we think it's important to, from us side, on a self-serving note, making sure we're getting 100% buy-in and making sure we're getting guaranteed business. But we want to make sure we're also in return supplying a higher level of service, as well as typically a lower price point, depending on the volume of certain things. So, but I think the idea of contingent from a recruiting standpoint, there's still places where it can make sense. But I think as the market has become more and more specific, we've moved away from an area where there's pools of talent, where there's lots of people doing the same thing, because requirements have become much more particular, like I said, specific, where that's not the case anymore. Everything is like truly a headhunting search. So.
Yeah, and if I want to just kind of tap into current events right now, it's fascinating what I'm seeing, that there's never, and you've seen this before because you've been through 2 of these recessions, never in my recruiting lifetime have I seen so much A-list talent readily available on the market. So there's 2 things here. One, do clients, can't they just go out and do it themselves, right? I'm hearing that a little bit too, right? Like, why am I going to pay somebody to go do that when there's so much incredible inbound coming right now versus 7 weeks ago? And 2, I think also as recruiters, I think it would be prudent of us to help everybody by not poaching during this time, to not poach people that are currently working, because there's so many good people out of work. What are your thoughts on these 2 points?
The first point, I don't know if the market really makes a difference. I mean, I think that all companies have the idea that they can do it themselves. And here's the thing, like, if you can do it yourself through referrals and whatnot reliably, you should, right? Absolutely. Like I've always said that. The challenge is that a lot of times that, companies that are looking to hire think things are easier than they are. They don't realize how specific these skill sets are until they get like knee deep into it. Or they might hire an internal recruiter. And you and I know this, like, just from being recruiters, like, I can't recruit on everything. I'm not an expert in every single area.
You're not a generalist.
So like you asked me to recruit, like, we have a team that does finance and accounting. I'm not on that team. I don't know how to do their job. I don't know how to like qualify these people. I get them involved. But if you're looking for top tier talent across lots of different areas in the organization, the chances are like hiring one recruiter isn't gonna be able to do a great job in terms of equally in kind of all those areas. It should be an easier, right? In terms of like the current market, yeah, it should be easier right now for companies to kind of do it on their own, but that doesn't mean they still have the talent in-house that knows how to actually do it, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a hiring market, you know what I mean? It went from a candidate driven market to a hiring market like overnight. So,
and what do you think about not poaching right now? From a philosophical kind of standpoint, right? Like,
I believe that candidates, if you're just because you have a job doesn't mean you should stay there, right? If you're currently working right now and you don't like your job and there's a better opportunity out there, like, why wouldn't you go after it? It's not the recruiter or anyone else's fault. I believe in everyone gets to make their own decisions, and I wouldn't be in. So I think that's more of the decision of the candidate, that if they want to leave their job, it's up to them.
It's a free market too. So I want to talk about your process at Hirewell for hiring recruiters. How do you go about hiring a recruiter? What are some of those initial questions that you ask to see? Well, there's 2 things. There's new recruiters. I don't know if you hire fresh, brand new recruiters, like kind of out of school, and then 2 seasoned recruiters. What's their approach there?
So most of the time nowadays, we hire a lot more seasoned recruiters than we do junior recruiters. So I think it's important to be able to kind of develop your own talent in-house. But our approach to hiring people really comes down to, we want to create an environment where people want to work here, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it sounds obvious, but
no, there's a big difference in recruiting firms, right? There's chop shops, sweatshop, relationship places.
So one, our business model is a little more solutions focused. So it's a little more interesting and it's a little more engaging. Like we're doing some interesting things from the business model standpoint that other companies aren't doing, which is exciting to a lot of people. Two, we have a lot of breadth of different roles. We have breadth of different skill areas and stuff we work in, and we typically have a lot more senior staff. The thing is that ever since I've been here, like we're just not a chop shop. We want to create an environment where people are challenged, where everyone treats each other with respect. There's no, we never have scenarios where people are fighting over territory,
Splits,
candidates, and stuff
yeah,
like
they're
that.
not getting into territorial battles.
Yeah, if you make it, it's not hard. If you just make an environment where people actually enjoy showing to work because it's not cutthroat and then everyone's, kind of going towards the same goal, like it's just a lot easier to attract people. Plus, I mean, frankly, a lot of these firms underpay, so if you're just pay a little better than what the market is, it's attracting people. Plus, frankly, a lot of the stuff we're doing, like a lot of what I talk about on LinkedIn, is people we're transparent in terms of what we're about. So it just makes it easier to kind of attract people.
Yeah. And that's a part about recruitment marketing too, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Yeah. So, but in terms of hiring, senior people, it kind of comes down to what the needs we have internally are. And, we have different parts of the organization where we need people with different types of skill sets and backgrounds. So we're always, kind of open to talking to people and seeing, but we always want to understand kind of what, where our client needs are, what aspects of the business we see more growth in, and we kind of target that. In terms of junior people, we also hire people at more junior levels, but we want to make sure we have enough senior people that have the bandwidth to do the training, which I think is important, because I think that's one mistake that a lot of companies make is, they hire too many junior people at once where they can't actually train them properly.
And give them the time.
It's a disservice to everybody. You're not setting people up for success if you're trying to overdo it. And I know, again, it comes down to like a lot of the organizations that are shops do it because it's cheaper talent
and churn and burn, right?
So
it's style and smile, right? Like that's what they're. But that's the old mentality, right? So one question I love to ask seasoned recruiters, right? If you had a day one recruiter, sitting in front of you in your office on the first day, you've already showed them around and everything. What's the one golden piece of advice you would give that recruiter to be successful in our industry?
You can't be afraid to ask for help, because recruiting is to anybody who's new, it makes no sense at all. Everything is counterintuitive. Like, I don't know anybody who like day one is like, oh, this makes perfect sense. Like, you're having a lot of uncomfortable conversations with a lot of people. It's not apparent as to why right away. It doesn't really come naturally to anybody. So, and I think a lot of people struggle to understand kind of the why of what they're doing. And once they start to understand that, it makes more sense and they really excel. So I would say just make sure you're asking questions and wrapping your head around kind of what the methodology is, why you're doing the things you're being asked to do. Because when you do that, I think it's easier to pick up. So
yeah, that's fantastic. So let's talk about some current events right now. The age of COVID in recruiting. I mean, I could speak from my own personal experience. My business was doing really well up until about 7 weeks ago. And then, shit hit the fan. We hit this brick wall and companies either stopped hiring, they furloughed people, they let people go. So depending on your industry, there's a lot of there's a lot of recruiters on the market. There's a lot of recruiters out of work, independent recruiters like myself. So you need to be able to pivot. You need to be able to pivot and add value and create new lines of business. And you and I were talking about some of the work that you're doing around a service for job seekers, right? For candidates. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something I don't know how I can rant on something else here, but
wherever you want to go, man. You're the guest.
I've always thought there's a need for actually helping people become better at doing their own job search. And, there's, taking a step back, there's a misconception with a lot of people. They think that it's a recruiter's job to find them a job, which it's not. Nope. It's a recruiter's job to help a company hire people. So, and if it works out the other way, that you help someone to find a job, that's great. And that's frankly, it's one of the better things about the job is that like, there's that externality of that's like a good thing, right. But it's not social work, right?
It's the altruistic element of it, but we're ultimately, whoever's paying our bill is the one we're beholden to. That's our client.
Yeah.
The client's paying me. That's the...
But at the same time, it's kind of messed up because there's definitely people who need help with their job search that, maybe aren't, there's certain skill sets and some of them that like people who can find a job so easily, no matter what. It's an easy layup. But there's a lot of other people who are very talented, very skilled, that might not fit squarely into those very regimented requirements, that have a lot to offer, but they're just not experts at job searching, because nobody is, right? Like, how if someone's been, they were working for 10, 15, 20 years, they made two
They've been
job
out of the
changes.
market for a long time.
You're gonna suck at job searching because you
Technology,
just don't do
techniques,
it, right?
Yeah, they don't get it.
So, and there's nothing wrong with sucking at doing it. Like, you're not supposed to be good at it, right? So, but at the same time too, like, how can we actually help people actually become better at doing their own job search, actually helping teach them a skill, which will, because they can carry it throughout the rest of their career. So what we've been doing kind of in the phase one was really just, we have, some extra bandwidth with everything right now. We've been doing a lot of conversations with people, just kind of understanding, okay, just because any good recruiter should be able to help someone out pretty efficiently, just kind of listening to them, understanding kind of where they're struggling. And
100%.
We've been having a couple hundred conversations across the organization so far. We're kind of logging everything, understanding people's questions, putting our heads together, because at HireWell, everyone has a very different background. So a lot of people start in HR, like they'll start in internal recruiting. So people have different perspectives. Maybe they work in different fields or came from different companies previously, but we're actually putting together like a core curriculum. So soup to nuts in terms of like the early phases of understanding your story, targeting companies you want to work with, potentially, resume advice, LinkedIn, how to do personal brand on LinkedIn that's specific to job search, how to take a more direct approach, how to negotiate, how to interview. And interviewing is obviously like, there's tons of different skill sets. So there's a lot that kind of goes into it, but then it's a matter of, long-term where we see this headed is kind of a mixture of things. So one, providing, content services around all these different areas. Some people have very specific skills, making sure we're getting very deep beyond the BS. Like you can Google a blog on any topic out there and it's just rehashed of someone else's blog. Like we actually want to get very kind of deep in each topic, to actually providing some, potentially technology tools, which help people manage their search. They can actually track where they've been doing, reminders. There's so many aspects to it that would make things easier. That's a
big one there too, right? Like a project management tool for your search. Like where did I apply? When did I last talk? When do I need, like from a CRM perspective, how soon do I need to follow up? Did I follow up? Simple things like that are not out there, man. Yeah.
And then 3, like just one-to-one coaching, like, cause that's the biggest thing that I think that, I mean, I give away a lot of details for free on LinkedIn, right? But the challenge is that if someone could tell you to do something, it might make sense, but people are still going to have questions because when you're trying to apply it to what you're doing, it's a completely different animal. So, making sure we're making ourselves available, we can provide some sort of service where you can actually, if you have questions, you can get kind of one-to-one coaching and stuff like that. So, that's kind of the goal. Like we've got, it's going to take us a while to kind of get to that thing, but like we've got the core curriculum coming together quite nicely. So we're hoping to get things up and running sooner than later. But, as of now, the feedback we've gotten has been phenomenal just from kind of doing the free coaching we're doing. So we kind of put something out there that, we're offering 2 free sessions to anybody, who needs a hand. Right. We got so many responses. We had to close it off to just Chicagoland people because it was just like overwhelming, which is good. But it's been, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of talented people out there that just need a little bit of help. And it makes a big difference for them. I mean, the question is it why? Is it almost like a spring training model, right? Like you look at them as your potential candidates that you're going to put out there to your clients and you want them just to shine. Is that the thought behind it? No, it's not. I don't really see it being tied into the recruiting business per se. I think that, in some cases it certainly could, but I think it's kind of a standalone service. Like there's, I could help. There's people in industries we don't work in that, or, I don't really see it. It's not that self-serving where it's just like a farm system for all the other recruiting doing. I think it's structured in a way where it can help absolutely anybody, because I think that, I think it's kind of universal. So, do you see yourself, do you see the company potentially making this as a paid for service eventually? Like a paid coach? That's the thought process there. It will get paid for service someday. We're not doing this like completely out of the goodness of our hearts, but I think there's some, in the short term it is, but it's, kind of all we're asking for is feedback. But I think honestly, I think there's a big demand for it. And I think most recruiters just overlook it because, companies have more money and can pay a lot more money than individuals can, but you got to diversify, right? That talks to the point about diversifying and added services too. You got to come up with new revenue streams, especially now. And think about that. You're kind of hitting on that too, the core expertise.
a good recruiter is a really good career coach in theory, right? Like we understand the ins and outs. We know the back doors. We know what gets through to recruiters. We know like what's going to shine on a resume. We know what we look for. We know about navigating the interview process and all those steps. So who better?
I mean, I do know a couple of career coaches who are great, and they were former recruiters,
Yep.
you know? So it's an area where you're probably an expert in this and you don't even realize it. And I think a lot of recruiters are. But it's a different business. It is a completely different business, you know?
Yeah,
so
totally.
it just kind of comes down to, I think it's just something that's good, gets overlooked, and we don't want to overlook it anymore. So
absolutely. So let's shift gears a little bit. I admire the way you and Hirewell present your company and your personal self on LinkedIn. You guys are doing a great job of that. What's kind of your thoughts on your content strategy on LinkedIn?
Come on, man, Gary V model, you know it. No, so I've always found it was it's easy to, because I don't do as how many podcasts do you do? Like how often? What's the frequency of them?
Traditionally I release one podcast a week. In April I doubled up to do 2 a week, and that's just because I've been backlogged and I was hoping to get a bunch more of them out and get some good people in front of people sooner.
Okay. I mean, we're probably, 2 to 3 a month, so a little bit less, but, I always found it's easiest to do, create long form content, do a podcast. I always do them live. So, and I've also integrated recently, yesterday was the first time I did one. I did LinkedIn Live. It's also a Zoom webinar. So people could actually sign up ahead of time, register, calendar links, all that kind of stuff, which I don't know why LinkedIn doesn't have it.
How'd you link that? We'll talk about that offline. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk about how I did that. So that was pretty cool. And then turning into a podcast, and then, you get so many clips and things you can share, out of any good discussion. So I think really the strategy, I guess, is in terms of delivery strategy is just, make long-term content, cut it up into pieces, reshare kind of
rocket science and stuff. It takes work. It takes work for sure, but it's not rocket science.
It takes work, but it's easier than trying to create a lot of individual one-off pieces by a million miles over. You know what I mean? You have one good conversation, you can have, 5-10 things that came out of it. So,
exactly.
That's part of it. But, really, it's just that I think in terms of what we want to talk about, it's like we never talk about salesy stuff. Like the most selling I've done is the questions you asked me earlier about our business model, right? Like I never talk about this stuff very often. So
it's a recruiting podcast. We're gonna get to some nuts and bolts here.
Yeah, like I might talk. I've definitely talked about how much I hate contingent and things like that, but and flaws I see in the model. But lately, I mean, everything we're talking about is more job seeker focused, which you can imagine. But we'll do podcasts on just kind of experts in anything related to anything HR-ish. So we've talked about, or anything in marketing too, since that's one of my passions. But really just kind of anything that can provide actionable advice or a tactical takeaway, and just putting it out there for free as a way of building our brand. Like that's the thought process. So
no, I absolutely love it. So some personal questions, man. I mean, one thing I love about you is that you're real. What does that word authentic mean to you?
I try to break, I mean, I've tried to become more and more authentic over time on LinkedIn, which is why I spend so much time like making sarcastic comments on people's posts. Cause that's just me, like it's fun. Yeah, I mean, it's the internet, it's social media. And I think that everyone, when it comes to like their business presence, I think people are way too stuffy and serious, and most people, they're just afraid to be themselves. It's not that they're trying to be someone else, they're trying to be fake. It's just that they're afraid to be themselves in like a business setting. But once you start to just like, lean into it a little bit and kind of relax, and as long as you're a good person to begin with, like people are going to appreciate you more and they're going to remember you more. And
it's relatable.
It's also, you don't have to think about it. You can just go.
I say that too. Right? The only thing I have to think about, right, is the New York sarcastic snarkiness, as I call it, right? Because that doesn't always translate well. Chicago, Boston, they pick up on it, right? We kind of cut for that similar, like, urban cloth here. But I got to be mindful too. Like sometimes I'll drop a joke on LinkedIn and it will not land well. Right. It'll just I'm like, oh, maybe I went a little too far on that one. So,
yeah. Well, I've been on the internet since the mid 90s. So
since Al Gore started the internet, right?
Basically. Yeah, literally. So I've had a lot more practice than most people. So, but I think, but the thing is, it's not just about telling jokes, right? Like, I think that authenticity for me is like I'll answer anybody's question. People hit me up in LinkedIn or whatever, and I'll just give them my honest thought. Happy to, like, I'm always kind of carving out time just to kind of connect with people and talk with people. But that's me though, right? So not everyone likes being funny and sarcastic. Some people have different personalities, but you got to do you, like, I think that you got to, whatever your normal everyday personality and style is, talking with people should be the exact same way you present yourself online.
And it's also so much easier, right? Like I never have to shift gears. I mean, I need to kind of monitor my curse words here and there, depending on the conversation. I need to kind of monitor some things I would kind of keep closed door kind of jokes too. But what you see is what you get. And I think that's why, you and I connected. You've been around the block. You've been in recruiting for a long time. What's the greatest piece of advice that you've ever received that you take action on every single day?
Greatest piece of advice. It's a boring one, consistency. I don't think that's a recruiting specific, but I think any part of life. I think that I don't think you can be successful without having a plan, executing on it every day, and just doing it day in and day out, no matter what. It's a boring answer, nothing sexy about it, but I think consistency is the hardest thing for most people. I can say, like, my career started doing better and better and taking off the more I learned that. So no one, like, having a regimented process for your day. It's funny because the people in my office, like, they think like that's me. Like, that was never me, right? I just like start doing it because you have to, you know what I mean? So now I'm the kind of person where I have a task list, and if I don't get it done, like, I feel terrible about myself, you know what I mean? It drives me crazy. So I feel better, like, knowing it's complete. But you have to have that consistency.
It's so interesting too. So a quick little story here. My first day of recruiting, I pivoted into recruiting when I was 35, right? So I had 15 years of experience behind me. So I had to be broke. They had to break me first before I can get all those old habits out of me. But I was lucky enough to learn under an old school recruiter who led my firm up there, and he gave me a very similar piece of advice, which I do every single day: is plan your work and work your plan. Right. Like, I know every morning when I'm going in from my bed to my desk next to my bed, I have that mindset. Here's what I'm going to do today. And some days I have it written out. Like, I have notes from the night before, what I need to accomplish the next day. And I feel really good at the end of the day, the next day. Like, when I look back on it, if I hit 80% of them, I'm a happy man. I mean, you know how it is in recruiting. We get sidetracked, we get taken in different directions. But if you know you're sticking with it and you're getting the things that you need to get done, you feel accomplished and you're moving things in the right direction.
I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, it's still a numbers-based business, right? As frankly, most jobs are. Yeah. I think that, like, success always comes down to, you can make the sports analogies, batting averages and stuff like that, but that's still the truth of it, So if you're not getting the work in, then you're never going to be successful. So boring answer, but that's it.
It's absolutely true. We're talking about coronavirus now. We're talking about, there's a lot of bad going on right now, but there's also a lot of good too. I'd love if you could share a professional silver lining and a personal silver lining that you've experienced over the last 7-8 weeks.
Professional silver lining. Not to go back to it, but the career services things we're doing. I'll put it this way. I said a few weeks ago that, like, everyone should be working on their side hustle right now, or their pet project, or developing their skill. Most people right now have a little bit more time than they did before. Maybe not most people. There's a lot of people right now, like, homeschooling kids. So, okay, if you're not doing that,
right. Let's caveat all that stuff so we're not offending anybody. The people who are 5 people in a 1-bedroom,
those people have
people
less
are homeschooling. The people that are, like, we're being sensitive. We're speaking in generalities. Thank you.
Everybody who's got more time, like, I think you should be working on some sort of side hustle or some sort of new thing you've wanted to do. And for us, I mean, it's the career services, right? So the job seeker focused kind of services. So that's been like a professional silver lining, because it's just a new interesting business challenge. And for me, like, my career, like the past several years, now I'm running the marketing at HireWell. That wasn't the case 3 years ago. The digital experience marketing group, we started that in 2014, 2015, like before. So getting to do every 2 or 3 years, getting to do something brand new has been good. So unfortunately, I wish it didn't cause a pandemic to make me make my next kind of shift into something new. Of course. That is the case. Personal silver lining. It's funny. I don't know if you've noticed this, but, like, I talked to my friends, the stupid Zoom happy hours everyone's doing. Yeah. I think this is everyone's having more conversations with friends they've, like, been disconnecting with now than before. And it just, and there's no reason why you couldn't before. There's nothing that, like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have more time to talk. Like, no, you have the same amount of time to talk to your friends you did before, but you just feel like you need to now. And so it's been cool kind of connecting with some people that, or at least connecting more frequently than I had.
No, that's awesome. And last but not least, right? Like, listen, you've been through the ups and downs of recruiting. I'm sure you've had your bumps in life too. And sometimes you got to pull yourself up and dig down deep and really harness that inner tenacity. And on the flip side of it, right? Like when you just want to show gratitude, you're happy for your family, you're happy for the life that you created and everything. James, what is your North Star?
What is my North Star? Oof.
What's your guiding light? What is it that you look to? What is, the reason for your why for everything that you do?
It's a tough question.
Well, if you listen to the show, it's coming. It's the same question I ask at the end of every episode, man.
You know full well I don't listen to any podcast by anybody. That's always the funniest thing.
Real quick point. Well, I'm gonna give a minute to think about this, but any podcast host is lying if they say that they listen to any other shows. They only listen to their own show. They don't listen to.
I don't even listen to my own show. I don't listen to I've always thought podcasting is like something you do when you have like a commute. So like my commute's like 20 minutes. I walk to my car. I drive to the train. I take it 8 minutes. I walk to work. Like if I had like an hour drive, I'd totally listen to podcast. But yeah, I don't listen to any
85% of my listens are in the car, man. My podcast listens are down this month, dude.
Yeah.
All right, get back to it. North Star. What do you look to, James?
I don't know if I look to anything aside from I just have a personal expectation. I have a personal expectation to always be doing my best, always be busting my ass every day, and always be thinking of the next thing. So I don't know of any other way than that. There's not some greater inspiration or greater belief system. It's just that I would feel incomplete if I didn't know I was leaving it all out there.
Yeah, man. No,
I don't know.
That's awesome, man. James, this has been great. I appreciate you, the knowledge that you bring, our camaraderie and relationship on LinkedIn, and just, that same cloth that we're cut from, that we want to add value. We want to enjoy what we're doing. We want to just make other people smile and help people out, because that's where it really comes down to. So I appreciate you and your time here. Where could folks find you? Where could they connect you? Where could they learn more?
Hit me up on LinkedIn, James Hornick. I'm pretty sure it's just linkedin.com/James Hornick is my handle there. So easy to find. So connect with me and connect with anybody who wants to. It's the best platform to hit me up on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Good stuff. And everyone who's been joining us live, everyone who's joining us, listening in their ears, hopefully in your car soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember to follow us on all the social media handles. Check out past episodes on www.thepodcast.com and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode jam-packed with more incredible humans. For more info, please visit www.nhptalentgroup.com.